I get to follow your lead.
Let me assure you it happens all the time. Well, looking at the clock and seeing that it's 2:30, if that's okay, we'll call the meeting to order. We're all meeting electronically, but I'm coming from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. So first item of business is approval of the agenda. Moved, I believe, by Director Wallace, seconded by Mayor Main. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to the next item then is number 3. That's adoption of the minutes. If someone could move the minutes, please. Moved by Mayor Main. Seconded by Director Wallace. All those in favor? Carried. Moving on then to the invited presentations. The City of Parksville staff. I'm not sure which staffer wishes to give the overview. Mr. Doxey, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm just going to share my screen here real quick for a moment. Bear with me. From the beginning. So hopefully you can all see my the screen presentation. Should look like a picture of the top of the dam site there. So this is the operations watershed and rainfall update for 2020. Here we have the current snow pillow elevations there. We're currently at 817. We're not quite full in the dam there, as you can see. And then, of course, obviously the orientation there where we're at. There's the dam up here. The next slide here, we have our operating dam levels. And so as you can see there, we're at a different time of year. We're normally, I think the last update we did here was in May, and so the dam was full. Whereas this time of year, you can see we're now at the filling stage with us just below, I think we're at about the 45% full stage here. That's about the 817 mark there that you see. So it is filling. We're above the minimum historic. We're slightly below the average. And we're well below the maximum dam levels that we've seen over the years. Snow pillow gauge. So here we have our near historical average, 211 millimeters, just down in here. Again, we're kind of looking at the data a little bit different time of the year. Here's what the current conditions kind of look like as of, I believe this was taken yesterday. About all you can see is maybe a tree through the fog there, and that's about it. But rest assured, it's wet and snowy. Next slide is our historical rainfall. So we've got the red line at the bottom is kind of our minimum levels of rain, and the green at the top would be our maximum rainfall. The blue line, we started out with just shy of a maximum month there in January, and then we're kind of sliding down close to very close to average here, with the blue line reflecting the current year and the orange line there reflecting the average, up at least to the date for right now. The next slide here is this is the river level of the hydrometric. These are the numbers reported by the hydrometric monitoring station. Now, this is an item that shows up in a spending package later on. You can see here just when the river levels should have been starting to go up towards September. We can see it ceased recording. There was some vandalism and damage done where the station and the casement or the vault that it was contained in was destroyed. So we're working with environment to have that restored, and that shows up as a budget line item in this year's budget. Major topics for Arrowsmith Water Service for this year is every year there's a dam assessment. It's usually a smaller one, and every 5th year there's a more detailed dam assessment done by an engineer. This year, so it's $65,000 for the more detailed every 5-year assessment. It's a statutory requirement by provincial regulations, and they look at the monthly inspections and the hazard of the dam and the surrounding watershed, as well as the hazardization and classification is reviewed, and the operating risk analysis is as part of that. The item below that is the hydrometric monitoring station repairs. So the total cost is just around $30,000, just shy of $30,000, and so our portion of that budget is the 15. We have a 50% cost sharing arrangement with the ministry. And then the other party, I believe, is the DFO, or the federal government, that actually pays for the other 50%. And the Ministry of Environment, the province, is just kind of the middleman in this operation. And that is that's the quick AWS water flow, stream flow, snow load dam assessment update. Questions?
Thank you very much. I believe Mayor Main has a question for staff.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm curious. It says here that it's $32,500 to have the inspection done. And then you put $32,500 in for a consultant. Do we need a consultant to do an inspection? I'm not understanding what the relationship is there and why it would be twice as much, or, you know, equal to, not twice as much, but equal to the cost of doing the inspection itself. Why do I have a consultant?
On the AWS side, the consultant is an expert or a structural expert that specifically deals with dams. I'm not sure I'm understanding the correlation on it.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, when I'm reading the spending package, it says $32,500 for the inspection, and then it says $32,500 for the consultant.
Gotcha.
So why am I getting either? Do I need an inspector or do I need a consultant, or why do I have them both?
It's effectively one and the same. I'm sorry. Now I'm picking up what you're laying down. So it's one consultant that does it all, or one office of consultants that does it all. And the inspection portion of that is them going out and reviewing, surveying, taking site notes. And then the other side of that is the actual creating of the professional report or the consultant report. So when the estimate was done, it was kind of broken up into two parts. But the overall cost for the entire thing is $65,000.
It's this, okay, follow up if I may, Chair.
By all means, please.
So what you're telling me is that the company that's bidding on this is bidding $65,000.
Yes.
We don't have two separate companies.
We have, well, lucky Nate way in here.
I believe you're still muted, Mr. Butterworth.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I just wanted to make sure I could get in here. So the 65,000 was an estimate that came from operations for that cost. It's an estimate at this point in time. We don't have a quote. We haven't gone out for tender on this yet. The split, the 32.5 and the 32.5 is half of the estimated cost was put into operations because it has an operating impact, and half of it was put into maintenance because it's a dam safety review. So it relates to the maintenance of the dam itself. Right. So it's basically just split into two different pots, and the cost sharing of the two different pots is different. So that's why we split it and just didn't put it in one place, because Qualicum shares on the maintenance side, but they don't share on the operating side. So in fairness, we just split it. I don't know what the split really would be. We just picked a 50-50 split.
Lucky, that's a great explanation, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions to staff at this point? Director Wallace, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question through to staff regarding the monitoring vandalism. Is there, I understand it's a cost sharing an item, but is there not insurance for that? And, you know, the more entrance, I guess, recreationally to the area, I see in the report it will be relocated to hopefully prevent this from happening again. But so question A, is there insurance for this? And if there isn't, should that be looked into for potential repeat?
If I may, through your worship, or through the chair, sorry. There is not insurance. That was a question that went back to environment, and it falls below their threshold. If it was in our tangible capital asset listing, it would be listed with our insurance carrier, but being as the province, it falling below their threshold, and them being a bit of a middleman between us and the federal government, there isn't any such setup right now. It's something we would entertain or look at. It's never really come up until now. There's been an operational cost sharing agreement, but we've not had any kind of significant, minor capital or investment into it until this has occurred. So it's just never come to light.
And any further questions at this point? The only question I would have then, if I may, is I'm just thinking in terms of the potential for a second incident like this at the subsequent location, should we be looking at any subsequent measures to ensure that this sort of vandalism doesn't happen again? Like say a protective covering or something like that, or is that something that'd be unnecessary?
We're looking at relocating it to a much more visible place where there'll be some street lighting available and a little bit more public eye. The $30,000 doesn't contemplate any kind of security cameras or anything like that at this point in time, but we're pretty confident that it'll be more secure. We're working again with the administrative environment and kind of taking some cues from them, and too, as well as the other partner there for the 50% in terms of what they're willing to put up for costs. So
that seems quite reasonable. Honestly, I'm sure you're following best practices. So last thing I want to see operational costs that actually are more than the cost to fix it. If there's no further questions on item number 4 of the agenda, not seeing any at this time. So we'll move on. Thank you very much for that report, Mr. Doxey and Mr. Butterworth. That was very well done. Moving on to delegations, I don't believe we have any. Correspondence, I haven't received any. I don't see any on the agenda. Unfinished business, there's none listed. I'm going to scroll down on my computer here. So reports 8.1, the Arrowsmith Water Service 2021 to 2025 financial plan report. Is there a member of staff who'd like to sort of take the ball on this one? This would be Mr. Butterworth, please, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just have a brief report on budget changes for AWS, and I'm going to try and share my screen. I was having a challenge using I was trying to set up the PowerPoint into the full screen, and every time I did, it takes up both screens and I can't see anybody. So I'm not sure what's wrong or what I'm doing wrong there, but so I'm going to do it without it actually being in the full PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen now. So we'll just do it in this format here. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is just a presentation on the AWS budget for 2021 to 2025. So we'll just go through the budget changes. We've already discussed some of them in Joe's report. The spending package discussion, again, those were discussed, and this draft financial plan. So it should be really quick. So our budget changes. There's just a few items where we added in some supervisors' wages into the administration. Previously, there was none, so we put 5% of our chief water operator wages into there as a line item. Maintenance, equipment rental, I thought it appeared like it was a little bit too high on the budget. We're coming in far below, so we reduced that budget 3,000. And the other 3 items are the items that were just previously discussed in the previous presentation, which we have spending packages for, which were included in the agenda package on pages 11 and 12 of the agenda. So there's more details of those items in there, which I think people have already read. So, that's the 2 spending packages there. And of course, there is the what the financial plan looks like, and the partners' contributions on the top of that. So, and that's essentially all I have. So if there's any comments on any of those items or changes, back to the changes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butterworth. Are there any questions for Mr. Butterworth at this time? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. If someone, I believe we need to move the actual, the respective portions. So someone would like to move the business on the floor. Sorry, Director Wallace and then Mayor Main. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you very much again, Mr. Butterworth. Moving on then to 8.2, the Arrowsmith Water Service Joint Venture Agreement Renewal. So if a member of staff would like to maybe give a brief introduction to this item. I believe Mr. Walters is stepping up. Please, sir.
Thanks, Chairman. Through you to the board and others. As everybody probably knows, the AWS and ERWS joint ventures are established with a legal agreement that had a 5-year term. It expires at the end of this year. And we've taken on the renewal of that and the modernization of it. Not so much different in the AWS as the ERWS, but The lawyer has provided us with a draft just this week, which I've sent out to staff at the city and the town of Qualicum Beach to have a look at. And we hope to get this sort of through the staff level and back to the respective councils and boards to get it approved and sort of put into service.
Thank you very much for your work, Mr. Walters. If someone would like to move the business then. Director, I think Mayor Main was first and then Director Wallace is very close. Is there any discussion at this point in time? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And the motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving then to business arising from delegations. Well, there weren't any. Is there any new business anyone would like to bring forward? Not seeing any at this time then. Motion to adjourn. Made by Director Main, seconded by Director Wallace. All those in favor? Thank you very much. The motion is adjourned, and thank you very much for all your hard work to all the staff who put this meeting together. Thank you again. Take care. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've still got someone sharing on the screen right here. Is everybody still there?
Probably lucky.
Yes, I see Englishman River draft ERWS. Your Lucky Butterworth's screen is on right now. There we go. Thank you for clearing that up. Otherwise I can't see people when they're making their motions here. Seeing that it's 2:45, I'd like to call the meeting to order for the ERWS right now. I'm showing at 2:47 p.m. Everyone appears to be online. I would like to ask for approval of the agenda at this time. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Director Wallace and seconded by Mayor Ed Main. Are there any errors or omissions in the agenda? Are there all those in favor? All those opposed? That is carried. Thank you. I go now for the adoption of the minutes, if I may. The minutes of the Englishman River Water Service Management Board meeting held May 19th, 2020. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Thank you. Do I have Mayor Ed Main as the mover and Director Wallace as the seconder? The recommendation that the minutes of the Englishman River Water Service Management Board meeting held May 19th, 2020 be adopted. Are there any questions for staff or any discussion at this time? All those in favor? All those opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Invited presentations at this time for item 4 on our agenda includes Parksville City staff for the Englishman River Water Service overview. City of Parksville staff will step in now, please.
Except now I'm not muted. So hopefully on the right-hand side, you can now see my other screen. That should be the presentation for the ERWS operational and construction update for this year. I'll just, okay, there we go. So here's a bit of an overview of, we used to call it contract 1. As we start to kind of come out of the construction side of things, this is effectively the big part of the ERWS system as a whole. So you can see here's our water treatment plant. You can see our raw water intake along the Englishman River here, near a ½ kilometer transmission main over to the Nannies Bay pumping station that's just located off of Northwest Bay Road over here. Substantial completion was achieved in May 19, and there was a 2-year maintenance and warranty period on this contract. So we're in the second year, or going into the second year of that here right away. I'm going to go from the bottom to the top, so starting at the river. And so since for the bulk of the capital construction is mostly completed, we're working through warranty issues and items. I'm just going to kind of go from the bottom to the top and kind of highlight some ongoing things that are being worked on either through the construction contracts or through just operational process improvements and reviews, and some of the things that impact or affect or are affected by the budget that you're going to see later on in the presentations. So the raw intake structure, it's obviously located at the river. You can see here the top of the intake structure there is during a higher level flows is only marginally above the water line, and in severe flows you can get water over a meter above the top of that intake structure. You can see that reflected below here in some high level flow events that that murky water, turbid water can kind of flood over top of that. And then you can see, of course, the impacts to the system and some of the operational impacts where we get debris and rocks that have to be cleaned up and cleaned away from the intake screening. So this impacts an area that we're working on in concert with the consultants to make sure that we can access and maintain this in keeping with WorkSafe requirements and regulations. To do two things, I guess, keep our plant operating and sucking water smoothly and efficiently, and keep our workers safe. The raw water intake structure, a little bit more detail on it. We're developing developing the plans and procedures there for when the intake structure requires cleaning. So you can see this over to the right, kind of what this would look like. If the water level is up here, you can obviously see these screens are getting flooded at the front face, and they're subject to being inundated with sand and debris, which can settle in here, and it can eventually oblique even the suction lines coming in from the river. And so there's a couple of ways that this is done. One is developing a way to screen off the intake structure as a whole, and either do one of two things: vac truck it out, or even have a man have to go in and shovel out the corners. But it takes a little bit of operational man force and some resources. A couple of the other things that we're noticing is when this was originally designed, there was not, fresh water was not part of the structure requirements for the raw intake building as a whole. In the building permitting process, they ended up bringing in water for the purpose of sprinklering the building. However, for cost sake, the raw water pump seals were left to be lubricated with the raw water. What we're finding is that it's wearing the seals, and we're just about to go on to our third set of raw water pump seals for that this year. The cost for that would show up something in the neighborhood of about $22,500. It's just over between $5,000 and $6,000 about each time. Over to the bottom right, you can kind of see some of the impacts a little bit there. You can see some water still sitting on the top of a flange plate there and mounting plate. And with the proximity to our motor control center, you can see we wouldn't want those seals to get too out of hand, as it could damage the motor control structure if they started spraying water too violently. We have an air burst system in there that's used to clear debris and sand from the intakes, and it's kind of fun, so I'll show you a bit of a video real quick if I can. That's the process in the design that blows away debris, sand, tries to clean that out, and right now that's done on a daily basis. And that's one of the things that we're looking at is appropriate schedules for that, and what the capacity for the compressor is to blow that away, and also help be a part of cleaning that intake structure out. The next step in that is it goes to the sand separators over here before it's sent up to the water treatment plant as a whole. So that's the compressor here that blows the air, and then here is the outcome from the sand separators. You get a bit of a slurry water that it just delivers clean, fresh river water and sand back out to the environment. The intake structure, just for semantics sake, it's got four screens down there at the river. They feed two carrier pipes, a 0.5 meter diameter carrier pipes, and they go into two separate pump wells The two pump wells have 4 possible wells on top. So you can see there's one pump on each well, and there's a spare pump on each manifold. So this and this are sharing a manifold, and that's about it. In profile, then again, you can kind of see the kind of the operational semantics of how when sand gets in, it gets into this intake structure, comes down into the sump, and then it can become sucked up into that seal water intake, and then straight into the seals from there. I'll go over a bit of the treatment plant overview, like process overview, just for good measure and explanation. So again, we've kind of covered the raw water pumping station, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. After it comes out of there, it comes up to, it's about approximately a couple hundred meters outside of the actual water treatment plant. There's a line where the coagulant is injected. And then it enters into the treatment plant, and it goes through a couple sets of strainers. During those high turbid events, we're finding that we need some process review for the, maybe reviewing coagulant and timing and spacing, because what's happening in high flow events is our strainers are getting clogged up, and they're you'll see later on there's some photos of per scale for size. They're quite large. They take quite a bit of manpower and resources to take them apart and to clean them out. From there, it goes into the first stage membrane racks. And then after that, they go through a UV system. There is an option for them to go through a second stage membrane rack as well. And then the second stage rack has its own UV system after it. And so both get UV treatment, and then they're into the chlorine contact tank, where they are dosed up and sent through the high lift pump station out to the distribution system. There's a chemical room that does the magic of all of this. Between the membranes and the chemical room, there's a series of sulfuric acid, sodium hypochlorite, coagulant, citric acid, and then chlorine are all kind of located in the chemical room, and they operate through a series of what they call clean in place or CIP valves that also come up later in the presentation, and that's what controls what chemical goes into what rack and what direction the water's flowing to control whether or not we're backwashing for cleaning or if we're actually making production water. So that's about as simple as I can probably make that. Here's a picture of those strainers. They're about the size of a human standing upright, so they take quite a bit of man force to take them apart. There's quite a number of bolts that all have to be undone and torqued at the end of it to get access to those for cleaning. And of course, the obvious is higher doses, like bigger storm events require more coagulant and for more solid removal, and that in turn causes the strainers to clog up potentially. So one of the things we're looking at is coagulant type and dosing, and that shows up in some analytic. It shows up later in the budget anyway, and we'll get to that. Here's kind of a high-level picture of what the membrane racks kind of look like. So this is them in situ. This is kind of a cutaway of what one would look like inside, more or less, with the hollow fibers that are inside, and then this would be like a blow up of what the actual fiber looks like, where you're putting raw water under high pressure, and then the cleaned water filtered permeate comes out the other side to distribution. As you can imagine, this entire process is the number of cleans that you have to do, the amount of chemical that you have to use to backwash and clean these modules and membranes is obviously going to be dependent upon the river sediments themselves, how they react with the coagulants, how they get pulled out by the chemicals that are used for cleaning as well. So there's a few variables in that equation as to how well they're going to filter and how easy they are to clean. As the membrane modules are filled with water, they obviously become dirty, and then that's those aforementioned backwash and maintenance cleans. Here's kind of a picture of, I think this one is the second stage rack, and this would be the first stage rack. You can kind of see they're starting to get a bit of beige, brown, and that's when I guess it's due for what they call just a membrane clean, so to speak. So, but that's kind of what they look like. Disinfection, ultraviolet disinfection. So after it goes to the first stage rack, this would be the UV chlorination that hits the first stage rack. It's a little bit of a bigger system. There's not too much excitement on that. It works pretty much like a charm. The second stage membrane rack, this is when we're using the second stage, it's got its own UV treatment after its separate rack of modules. Currently, this is one we're having problems with. It's being fixed under warranty. It's not something we expect any issues with. It's just one of those items that sometimes you have to get a warranty repair made. The chemical room. So this is where the magic is all kind of held. So you can see a couple of large silos that hold a combination of coagulant, sulfuric acid, sodium hydroxide, the citric acid, and then the coagulant. To the bottom right, some people may have heard earlier in the year there was an issue with one of the sodium hydroxide pumps. It had to do with a connection made, an electrical connection, and we're working with the supplier of the equipment has come forward and agreed to pay for, I think it was up to 15,000 for pieces and parts, materials and supplies for the repairs, and staff have been undertaking the repair to that. Kind of on the side, there's some electrical work to get the heat trace tape put back on. And they're working on getting some of the conduit cut away and measured up for that activity to take place. Still to come. Let's see here. I've already mentioned the current the plant right now is set up. It's running a 50% mix of sodium hydroxide. The tank heaters prevent the sodium hydroxide. For example, the 50% concentration of sodium hydroxide right now can freeze at 12 degrees. It's not a huge problem, but the tank heaters, currently they've both failed and they're being replaced under warranty. An option that we are also looking at is changing to a 25% sodium hydroxide concentration for two reasons. One, it doesn't freeze at quite such a mild temperature, and the second reason is it's a little bit safer. The sodium hydroxide is it's the chemical that was going through the aforementioned chemical pump when a small electrical arc caused a fire. Sodium hydroxide, I believe, is a high oxidizer, meaning any kind of contact with water, and it can create a what you call an exothermic reaction of a little bit of a drama. So a lower concentration would also help that. The shot to the right is the clean in place valves. These are automatically actuated and controlled. Earlier we had some issues with some of those sticking. We are working through some operational recommendations that have come from the vendor that supplied them. And they've come out and done some, they've come out and tested and reviewed them and tried a few things with our staff and made those recommendations. They seem to have some short-term immediate improvements, but it hasn't been long enough for us to know if there's like further action needed under warranty or not. But that's kind of what they look like. There's over $300,000 of these in the plant, I believe. There's quite a few of these automatic controlled valves. The the water testing and the sampling program. So the NTUs, I think we previously had a slightly lower threshold that we were expecting. We've now noted that there's been 300 to 400 NTU coming in during high river storm or high water storm events, fairly routinely, like a couple times a year. Again, it's just reiterating that murky water, turbid water, it creates that need for more coagulant. The more coagulant, the more stress on the strainers, the more maintenance. And then similarly, the same impacts downstream to the membrane. So it's a lot of variables to play with to try to get the water clean and get the sediment removed as early on in the process as we can to do a couple things, make sure we have clean, safe drinking water, and also that we're extending the materials in our treatment plant as a whole. So we are not having any issues with the quality as a whole. We're able to get our NTUs are down. Chlorine levels have been good. The next slide here is our high lift pumping station. It's still inside of the main water treatment plant, but it's one big kind of soundproof room, if you will. So there's a big wet well under here and 2 high lift pumps on each end that pump it out to the distribution system. From our end of the distribution system, it goes out to the Springwood Reservoir, which is about 4.5 kilometers, a 600 diameter HDPE. That was done under a different contract, and that substantial completion was achieved in April of 2019, and that also has a 2-year maintenance period. For spending package discussions that'll show up kind of later on, the first one is the finished chlorine water analyzer. So there's a water analyzer before it goes into the chlorine contact tank. But one of the things that our operational crews have noted was that a finished water chlorine analyzer is about $7,000 provided and installed, and that would provide a lot of surety to make sure that the finished water actually is meeting the achieved or the desired results, and that there aren't any hiccups in the system before it actually hits a reservoir. The second one is an environmental monitoring fish habitat offsetting plan, and that was part of the original permit for the issued from the DFO for the occupation of the river intake structure as a whole. So that's kind of a regulatory or a statutory requirement, and we have to maintain that or execute that for 5 years. Aquifer storage and recovery, that's not a new project. It's been on the plate for a while. It's just we've created a bit of a spending package to help describe it and set a bit of a scope of term or terms of reference for both staff and elected officials to be able to identify and describe what that is. It's basically looking at using a confined aquifer storage space for storing excess water during high river flows and when water is available, and using it during low water resource times such as the summer. So the advantage there is obviously economy over building large reservoir structures. The other item there is the commissioning warranty and maintenance consultant. So we've got some funding in there as an ask for just working through some of these operational issues. Some of them we're going to come to find our warranty items, and that we'll get some recovery through the various installers, suppliers, and engineers. Some of them are going to be operational improvements and process changes that we just that are going to evolve as the plant comes onto fruition. We're basically working without a lot of background data right now. So as we start to see how the plant performs, record SCADA information, there'll be operational and process changes. So whether it's chemical changes, pressure changes, things to help improve the filtration of the water at as little price as we can. Is basically what that's about. And then also, of course, making sure, because we're in that 2nd year of warranty, we want to make sure the thing is optimized, running well, and anything that we can claim on warranty is claimed through warranty. So we need a little bit of expertise in water treatment plant process engineering design to help facilitate that. The next item there, sorry about that, is the scissor lift. That one's pretty basic. We didn't have it in year 1 because we didn't need it in year 1, but in year 2, a lot of the those aforementioned clean in place valves. There's valves throughout the piping in the plant. There's air releases. There's different equipment that has to be operated and maintained after the 1-year mark. And so as we're going into year 2, we have to start performing some of those maintenance procedures on that equipment to maintain our warranty status. So that's why the scissor lift is in the budget this year. Membrane analysis. I believe that was about a $10,000 item, and the rationale behind that was to take one module of the membrane out and send it off for a condition assessment to determine how it's been performing given the conditions that we're under. There's a couple of things that we're contemplating: a change of the aforementioned sodium hydroxide concentration. We're exploring options on coagulant to help improve the efficiency and the performance of the filtration. So having a current, how did the current membrane module perform with a year under the current situation would help provide a benchmark so that if we make a change, we know if it made any improvement or if it's to a detriment. So the other one there is, sorry, I got the condition assessment and the membrane analysis. The membrane analysis is to get some assistance from H2O is the company that provided the equipment. One of the services they can provide is SCADA analysis and review to help our process team develop optimal, basically optimal times and treatments for backwashing, cleaning, and maintaining that system. So they kind of go hand in hand, those two. They sound like they're the same, but they have the kind of same means to an end, but they're different parts to that problem. The other one there is an operational salary contingent, and this is just in recognition. We've noted there's a lot more time that's been spent in operations and maintenance over the last year, and so we're recommending to put a salary contingency in there so that if more time is required on the water treatment plant to address emergencies or increased operations, that there is a budget placed in there so that we can accordingly charge that out. The last item there that you see is the raw water pump seal modification. So as I was mentioning in that the intake structure itself, it was originally built and designed to not have potable water. And now that potable water is available, there's a newer type of seal system available that would use the potable water. It requires obviously changing the seals out, and it also requires a booster pump and a connection over to the water service, which is now, since the building and the sprinklering of the building for fire protection, that's now there, so we can connect to it fairly simply. But there's a cost for the booster pump, and then there's a cost for the seals themselves. And then that's the finished water, and then that's what it looks like when it's really fixed. Is there any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Doxey, there for that. And if I could ask you to unshare the screen so I can see the rest of the board members, Joe. Thank you. Thank you very much. So is there any questions for Mr. Doxey at this time? Mayor Ed Main, please.
You're muted, Ed.
Unmute, please, Ed.
There we go. Sorry. This newfangled equipment, I don't know. Anyways, I have a couple of questions that follow in sequence, so bear with me if you would. First question I have is, how much did we pay for a design engineer to design this plant? Do we know? Can somebody tell me?
I'm not sure of the entire cost. I believe the Jacobs contract was in the 900 plus thousand. But it was split over multi-years, and there was also pre-design elements that I think predated the Jacobs involvement.
So I guess what I'm going to, I'm looking at all these spending packages. I've got number 1, number 4, number 6, and number 9 in my mind are all as a result of not so good design engineering, if you will. You look at this stuff and you go, wait a minute, they knew what the conditions were. They knew where the water was coming from. They knew the type of water. They knew how the seasonal flows went from one month to the next and the high rains and all this kind of stuff. And now we're running like hell trying to keep up with all the damage that's going on. And we're looking at adding this to our budget. I've got a real problem here in the fact that, you know, as much, what, $80,000 we're going to pay to hire a consultant to tell us that our consultants didn't do a good job. You know, I just, every time we sit down at one of these meetings, it just feels like somebody's reaching in my back pocket and taking out more and more money for all of this. And it was just, it's been badly handled from the beginning. And I think that we've got to go back to the design engineers and say, you guys, you got paid really well to do this. You better come to the table and fix what you didn't design well, is my feeling. I don't see us having to set up more spending packages. Let's make them pay for what the costs are for this. They're getting off scot-free. I'm finished preaching now.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Main. I guess the question would be, that would be a question to Mr. Doxey, if is that a possible ask here, Mr. Doxey?
It is, and it's certainly part of the, it's been part of the commissioning process since commissioning, I guess, this first year of operating. We have been going back and putting a lot back on every vendor. So there's electricians, there's the process equipment, the membrane suppliers, and as well as the engineer that designed the plant as a whole. There's a few moving parts, and then there were some city decisions, or not city, sorry, ERWS decisions along the way that have certainly played a part. What we're needing to do at this point is get the plant in this last year of warranty. The important thing is, one, to get it running the way it's supposed to. And in that process, if there are items, like we will discover if there are, malfunctions with equipment, misdesigns, those things will come out in this process. But our prime goal at this point in time is to make sure that we identify what we can identify in this warranty period of time, get the plant up and running, and basically having a technical expert will certainly assist. It provides some kind of weighted evidence if we do need that to go back and kind of play a heavier hand on the maintenance and warranty cards.
Would you like to follow up at this time, Mayor Main?
I'm going to bite my tongue and hold off for a little bit and see what else comes to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Mr. Doxey at this time? Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair O'Brien, and through you, Mr. Doxey. In some of your slides earlier on in the first part of your shared screen there, you've shown the river at the intake point there with some fairly high turbidity levels. And also, when we looked at some of the impacts, both on the intake and then when we got up to the treatment plant, just wondering how many incidents have there been where the turbidity levels there and challenges with the intake have caused us problems of operational problems within the treatment plant?
I mean, through the chair. I can't say specifically. Our operations manager may have a more definitive count. I can recall about 5 situations where we've either been altered or shut down momentarily, meaning like a day to do some maintenance or cleanup. I think we were down for a couple days. I want to say back in November recently here, and that was we had an issue there where we took on some debris and one of the hatches blew open. And potentially, the reason that we were shut down for a couple of days for that particular instance was any possibility of having debris go into our what we call pump cans could damage the pumps, and so there was a lot of effort to make sure those were cleared of any debris that was possible, so that when we started back up, we wouldn't damage anything. So the actual necessary shut time probably wasn't more than a day, but there was a lot of very cautious approach to that just to make sure we didn't break anything. So we were down for I think about 3 days. But I want to say over the course of the year, I think we've had about 4 or 5 instances, to my recollection, where we've had more minor issues.
Any follow-up, Director Rogers?
Yeah, no, I'll leave it till later. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wallace, question?
Thank you, Chair O'Brien, and a question to staff through you, if I might, regarding the aquifer storage and recovery project. So I see here on the spending package that you've detailed the scope of it to include cost, to determine if there's a cost and benefit to using ASR for future water storage over conventional storage. Can you explain how the report will do that? Are you also costing what the conventional storage would compare as part of that project?
If I may, through your worship, I think Murray, Mr. Walters, I'm newer onto the project scene, and I believe Mr. Walters has got some background that would probably do better than myself.
Thanks. Through you, Chair, to Director Wallace. I think there's a couple things at play there that we need to wrap up in the ASR item that's listed in the spending package. And there was a lot of money and time spent on ASR up until about 2011 or 12 or so, when it was basically shuttered as the ERWS team was busy building the treatment plant and the intake and stuff like that. And although there was an awful lot of work done and a lot of consultants engaged, they never really drew a conclusion as to whether ASR was likely to be successful, nor did they draw any conclusions as to what the risks of it might be if it were to be implemented. So there's a bunch of questions that were left unanswered as a result of the work that was done. And what we would like to do with this item in 2021 is to go to those consultants and get them to package basically the work that they did and sort of the results of the work that they did, and give us an idea of, you know, what's the likelihood this is going to be worthwhile to proceed with. Are there any other sort of risks, notable risks and advantages that need to be considered, and also what the cost of it is likely to be if it can be pursued, as well as in the intervening almost 10 years, it would be nice if they could point out any other successful installations that have happened since then. So that's sort of the object of the work around aquifer storage and recovery that needs to be done, just to button that up and to find out whether it's actually worth pursuing, or if we just need to close the books on that and move on to another option for storage of water. And so the whole idea with this aquifer storage and recovery, you guys are probably more familiar with this than I am, but is we can take a lot of water out of the Englishman River in the winter when it's flowing really, really deeply. And, you know, we could store that water somewhere and then pull it out in the summer and use it when the river's not running very, very fast, and we all need the water. So that's the sort of idea. And that, with the studies that were done as part of the AWS and the early stages of ERWS, it's another 20 years before the city of Parksville and the regional district Nanuus needs that water. And the idea is to kind of get it prepared in time for when, you know, the growth gets to a point where we need that water in the summertime. And just, I guess, to address the other part of your question is, when we're talking about ASR, we're talking about water storage on the scale of a lake. And, you know, conventional above ground storage, while possible, is super, super, super expensive when you talk about the quantities required to have an effect like aquifer storage and recovery would have. So that's something to keep in mind. So, you know, we do need to package up the work that was done on ASR and make sure we fully understand it so that you all can make a decision on where we go with it from here on in. But it's not really a great comparison to, say, conventional above ground storage or ASR. They're not really A and B. You know, the alternative to aquifer storage and recovery is more like a big lake somewhere. It's sort of on that scale. So hopefully that answers at least some of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Follow-up, Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question, the follow-up I have for you is about the risks, because all of the research that I have done on this throughout North America, I don't see that they're using it for potable water. I see they're using it for agriculture. It's happening in places like Utah, Denver, Florida. These places don't have a lot in common with Nanuus or Vancouver Island. And I guess my concern, and I understand the history on this one, and in 2014 when they tested the K Road site and it didn't go so well, you know, they learned a lot in that process, but I guess that hasn't also been pulled together into a package. For me to be able to support this report in the budget, I would want to ensure that it clearly articulates the risks that fracking or putting pressurized water back into the ground could have. And will this report, because I've read some of the preliminary reports myself, and they don't speak to the risks, they speak to the results of specifically what they were testing. If we proceed with this, will it also articulate clearly for the public and for people making decisions what the potential risks of doing this could be?
Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes.
I guess a couple of things. Yes, definitely the risks have to be a large part of the work that's going to be done to wrap this up. I mean, we need to look at the risks, not only the risks to the water supply as a consequence of it, but other risks that could come as a result of putting water in the ground. But just to be clear, this isn't fracking, and it shouldn't be confused with fracking in any sense. This isn't putting pressurized water in the ground. This is filling up an otherwise empty aquifer, and the water just sits there basically under no pressure until we pump it back out again. So it's quite a bit different than fracking, and I'd hate for it to be confused in the public's eye as, hey, the ERWS is going to get into fracking, because it's definitely not that.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. I wanted to weigh in on this unless there's other further questions from other members. Thank you, Mr. Walters, for that as well. I actually was going to make a motion anyways that I'm not in favor at all of spending another $50,000 for a summary package of whether ASR would work or not. I felt that we spent way too much money in it already, and I believe that we should move on. And the thing is that I was actually going to say, leave that money in the budget amount, but it would change over to read to provide water storage options, including consultant reports, and leave the amount of $50,000. Just to have a summary report after all this time, to me, is just putting good money after. I don't want to say bad, because it was an experiment, but I feel that it has failed. And as to Mr. Walters' remarks, I've followed the ASR from the very start, where it's gone to. And I understand the principle fully, but I understand as what Director Wallace has echoed as well, that it is not currently in use for potable water in anywhere that I can find, even up until, well, I researched 2 months ago. I can't find any for potable water that was actually worked. And the trouble is with the ASR from the very start, in my opinion, and those of others in the field, is that our geotech with our sand and gravel, there's no suitable aquifer. I understand fully the principles of it. The fact that putting it underground into an aquifer would be very nice. But unfortunately, most of this area is on sand and gravel, and does not provide suitable storage for picking up that water when we'd actually need it. Not only to mention the fact that it is still, even though it is in an enclosed aquifer, is still subject to contamination by around sources. And further to the comment about extremely more expensive than above ground storage, as in water reservoirs, diversion channels. I believe that it's not a whole heck of a lot more expensive to do that, because basically we're talking about excavators in the ground making reservoirs. So I'm not sure that the expense would be that much greater than what this aquifer storage and recovery. So I think it's time to move on, folks. And I actually think it's time to recognize the fact that we're looking at sooner than that 20-year package of having suitable enough water that we have right now. In fact, I would hope to have a study done by staff anyways to make sure that we are on good footing. And I think to consider other storage, potable water storage options would be advantageous at this time. My thoughts. Thank you. I see Director Rogers have your hand up. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair O'Brien. Yeah, I guess to weigh in on this, I very much support and encourage keeping this $50,000 in here and completing a review on just the current status with respect to aquifer storage and recovery, to look and to assess what we did learn over the last 10 years within respect to this, both within K-Road and with the uncompleted work at the Claudette Road site. I think when a body such as the ERWS, which is a joint venture of Parksville and Area E of the Regional District of Nanaimo, when we enter into a process like that and take very significant dollars from senior levels of government's grants and put it into a assessment tool, which is what it was. It was to take a look at the feasibility and so on, and the viability, that concept of aquifer storage and recovery. When we do that, I think it is imperative on us to take that through its conclusion and just find out what the results were, what the process involved, and what the potential for that concept is, and what the risks are, and so on that, and what the potential cost could be, because it isn't one alternative that is presented out there with respect to storing treated water through the ERWS treatment plant and so on, and storing that for use at times when storing it when we're producing more water than we need, but storing it for when we do need it. And it is certainly, I think, of value to the public and to the residents and taxpayers of this system that we find out just what it is we do know, what we don't know, what the risks are and what the potential costs are and what the potential benefits could be from a point of view of being able to store water. So I very much support keeping this in this financial plan and concluding the report in 2021.
Thank you, Director Rogers. I recognize Mayor Edmain.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to staff, if I could, I just have a couple questions because I don't know whether it's a good idea or not, quite frankly. I don't know enough about it. I've got 2 reports. They're fairly extensive reports here that I've started to read and then fell asleep 2 or 3 times trying to get all the statistics out of it. But the original a request for proposal, when these were done, did they not have something in there that says they're supposed to follow up with some kind of recommendations or some kind of results from the test? I see they did all the tests, but I don't see where they've come back and said, yes, this is a great idea if you put it in whole number X and it will work. I don't see any of that. I see a lot of it could be, it might be, it should be, and all that, but we spent a lot of money for a lot of would-be's and could-be's, and we don't have anything here that after all of these years, you think somebody would know the answer to this. I mean, if there's no place else in the world, and I tend to believe what my 2 compatriots have said, that if there's no place else in the world that's giving us potable water for this, that's got to be telling you something. I mean, it really does. Now, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been all kinds of things that have happened in this part, but I'm in agreement. I'd like to take the 50 grand, stick it over in the side there, and let's come up with something a little bit different if this isn't going to work. But more importantly, why aren't the guys that wrote these reports coming up with the final summary or solution that they're supposed to let us know what they think? I mean, they're the experts.
Thank you, Mayor Main. If I would just like to comment on that, if I could, recognizing as well that all the original players, staff and consultants have moved on. There's not there's not a single staff member on City of Parksville or I believe even RDN. I understand, Mr. Walters, you said that you were new to this as well. No one even has the expertise to say what we did and why we did it, other than looking at a bunch of unfinished reports. And the thing is that, and the fact that these individuals have moved on without getting a summary conclusion on it, and it actually moved on to other projects or under portions of their life, raises a bit of a red flag with me, to be quite honest. And the thing is that, and then to ask our engineering staff, who, by the way, they had nothing to do with the ASR as well. And the thing is that they're going to be coming in this totally cold, picking up reports that they had nothing to do with requesting in the first place. And so they're going to be trying to fill in all the pieces. And I have to say that our engineering staff are already well taxed with plenty of other projects. And for them to just be taxed into doing one more project to do a study on whether ASR was going to work or wasn't going to work, it seems to be a total waste of resources, quite frankly, because they have a lot to do. You saw with Mr. Doxey's spending package that he is trying his darndest to pick up after other people's designers and other people's consultants to get this WTP working fine. And they're doing an amazing job, and I applaud them. But the thing is that to have one more thing, and oh, by the way, could you tell us what this system that they drilled holes in the ground 5 years ago, why it didn't work, or why they didn't follow it through, or is it going to work? I say it's time to move on. We have to look at other water storage solutions. And I think that should be done when our engineering department says they have, some ability to do that, or we can send it out to a consultant's report. That's my idea. I would not support it as an ASR. I would only support this as a agreement to put this water aside to include water storage options and consultants' reports. Thank you. Any other questions? Director Rogers, thank you.
Yeah, not a question so much, Chair O'Brien, but just a comment on it. One of the problems with the aquifer storage and recovery was that it was never completed. Parksville staff recommended to the ERWS that they not conclude that project at that time because of the workload with respect to the ERWS, the intake and the water treatment facility. So, and also at the time they said they could not handle completing that thing, although we had a well done at Claudette Road. And partway through that process, when they were taking the water back up and so on and that, they had some problems with some of the screens and so on. So they couldn't bring the water back up and test it for storage and do the actual test. So it is something that has not been completed. It is something that has been just left linger. I think it's a very poor approach when you look at something like this to do that. And it is one option that is out there. And if as a group that we're saying that we're just going to let that die and so on, and we're not going to consider that as one option and so on. And when you look at saying, okay, you're just setting this aside for storage in another area. This was a project that was to look at some storage for water within the Nanoose Bay Peninsula and so on that could be added as a supplement to our bulk water. So I'll just leave it at that. And I certainly do support leaving it in here in this budget for what it was intended for and what this group agreed to last year at this time would be put into the 2021 budget to move forward and do a complete, do the report on it and to summarize this and see where we are and whether it has any potential or not, rather than ruling out and say, no, we have no potential and we're just going to abandon it and go on. So
The chair recognizes Mayor Main.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment and follow up to some of the things that Director Rogers has said. And also, if somebody could point me to 2 locations in the world where a similar use for similar water quality for, something that we can say there, they did it over there and that's exactly what we want to do. I'd be willing to sit here and reconsider that. But if I can't be shown that it's worked anywhere else in the world, we've got enough problems trying to make the existing facility that we spent $44 million. We've got enough problems there to try to get it up to running properly, let alone trying to come up with something that is the first time in the world to ever come through. We don't need to be the first. I like to imitate, not with our money, So I'm thinking, show me 2 places in the world and I'll change my vote. Until now, I can't support voting in favor of this until I know that we've got at least a shot at making it successful.
Thank you, Mayor Main. Any other questions or comments at this time? I'll weigh in again, if I may. As to what Mayor Main has just recognized, the fact is that this is unproven technology, and I'm not faulting the original boards for putting it through, checking it out, but at the same time, it's unproven technology. I'm kind of old school as well. I know that when you take water from uphill, it flows downhill, and the thing is that we have plenty of potential to do that here. And we're blessed with the fact that with the Arrowsmith Massive directly behind our water treatment plant, that if the Highland water storage option was considered, the water is going to run straight down into the water treatment plant. Let me explain a couple other benefits of that. We're not using the Englishman River as a transmission main anymore. We're using hard pipe water from Highland water storage that will go directly into the WTP, thereby eliminating the turbidity and the sand and silt filtration problems because the water from the reservoir is not picking up the clay bank silt. So the thing is that it's going to be a lot easier on our water treatment plant that's struggling at times. We know it is. So the thing is that Highland water storage, although as Mr. Walters said, may be fairly costly to do the initial reservoirs. But the thing is that it's going to give us a much cleaner water. And the thing is that with a lot less treatment having to happen. And all of the options, a lot of the spending options that Mr. Doxey has presented here has all to do with the filtration, a lot to do with filtration. And the thing is, if we can eliminate that or improve on that filtration, then basically we're taking water exactly as we're taking water when we take it from the Springwood deep well system when we pull it, when we can't use the Englishman River. So the Highland water storage has some definite options or definite possibilities to actually save a lot of money on our treatment as well here. So the thing is that you have to look at it as a whole package. And ASR was looked at. I feel it's time to kick that one down the road. I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers, that's how I feel. I don't think it's negating all the work that's been done. I think in the fact that it was tested and didn't prove itself to be a good possibility and it wasn't pursued, I say we move on to something better. My thoughts. Are there any other questions? So I would say we have to take a vote whether to support this $50,000 as it is or not at this particular time. I would like to put a motion forward if I may. Oh, sorry, here we are. Thank you, CAO Kiva. Kaylor, thank you.
Sorry, Chair O'Brien, just to weigh in, it might be preferable, and it's up to the board, but if we are going to be looking at the budget under another item, there are some motions and recommendations that this item could be discussed at that point. But if you would like it to show up as a standalone item under the presentation section, which is section 4, we can do it in that area, but there just might be other budget items that you could lump together into an amended motion, but it's up to you.
I think that's an excellent recommendation. I wasn't really prepared to bring it up at this time. I was waiting for the financials to come through as well. So okay. I think that would be better time. That being as it is, if there are no further questions, I'll thank you, Mr. Doxey, for your presentation. We're moving along on the agenda then. We're looking for item 5, which is delegations. As there are no delegations, we'll move on to correspondence. We have received under correspondence 6.1, we've received correspondence from James A. Latisse as of the invitation to the effects of climate change on Vancouver Island Resources meeting. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the correspondence be received? Thank you, Director Wallace. Seconded by Mayor Main. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Carried. Moving on, there's no unfinished business in the agenda. We will move on to the reports if we could at this time. So would the please introduce the first report on the agenda, including the Englishman River Water Service Geobag Award 8.1, if we could, from staff, please.
If I may, through the chair, this is a project that was discussed in the last year's budget, I believe in an amended budget in May. We have, since May, there's been the preparation of tender documents in cooperation with the plant engineering design team at Jacobs. It's been tender documents created, it's been advertised and tender returned. The pricing is a little bit more than previously estimated at the time of the amended budget in May. And those costs are chalked up to a couple things. One being potentially COVID. 2, we've added an asphalt base to the project to help contain any kind of leakage or seepage and help it be more identifiable, and to basically helps with the maintenance over time. So the default would be like a poly liner on the base on top of gravel. If that were to be perforated, it would be very easy for the leakage to not be noted, and for the wetted base, it would in turn likely be subject to potholing and require more extensive maintenance when it's time to change out the bags. So the asphalt base added about $50,000 along with the base to the project, and then of course we've got inflation and the impacts of some COVID in dealing with just material supplies and just mobilizing labor and efficiencies around that. And then the recommendations are for the report. If there's any questions, I can take them separately.
Are there any questions for Mr. Doxey regarding the geobag system? Seeing none, I have one question only, Mr. Doxey, if I could. Do we know of the synthetic bag system? Do we know of if we could? Is there a annual maintenance cost that is going to be considered for this? I'm not knowing how often the geobags have to be changed over. Do you have an estimate on frequency of change?
If I may, through chair, or back to the reply to the chair, Yes, they're indicated in the budget documents themselves, overall operations and maintenance. The bags themselves, they're between $16,000 and $32,000 for replacement and renewal. The idea is you take a bag out, it goes to landfill waste, and then you replace that bag. We did have a small change. Just operationally, we thought it would be better to go with 4 small bags as opposed to 2 large bags, and that would give a little bit of flexibility given when we run coagulant. We're not running it all the time. We're running it in the winter months, and kind of just having 4 small bags as opposed to 2 big, it costed a little bit more, but it gave a lot of operational flexibility to the system. So it might be that we only have 1 bag per year, or we might have 2 bags per year. And once we get into it, we'll know some more certainty, but they are sized and designed to generally be disposed of after 1 year per bag.
And as a follow-up, as the bags themselves, you mentioned they will be going to landfill. Are they considered contaminated waste at this point?
I don't believe so. I don't know the distinct answer to that. I believe they can just go straight to landfill.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure whether with the coagulants and so forth and what was actually being deposited in those bags, whether they're contaminated. You've obviously already looked into it, so I'm happy with that. Thank you. So do we have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? As follows. If you'd like me to read them out, I will, but if you already have them in front. Moved by Director Main, seconded by Director Wallace. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.2 on the agenda, we have the Englishman River Water Services 2021 to 2025 financial plan reports. Call on Mr. Butterworth at this time, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll try this again. I'm going to try and share my screen and see if I can get this working this time. And see what happens when I do this. Come on. There, do we have the PowerPoint there now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're just going to go through, there's quite a number more, there's a lot more items, budget changes in this for Englishman River than there was for AWS. So there's a few more pages and a few more slides in this presentation. Some of them we've already gone through with some of the ones that Mr. Doxey went through. So we'll just go over through the budget changes, spending package discussions. We'll talk about establishing a reserve for future expenditures and then the draft financial plan. So in the budget changes, I've got different categories here. So the first items on this screen are spending packages, which Mr. Doxey quickly referred to. And these were in the previous financial plan. So the first 2 items here, they were in the 2021 column last year, and now they're in the current column. But in order to give the board a background, we create spending packages, which explains the project. For larger items, we put that in their spending packages to explain the project. So these are not new items. They were in the plan, but there's a spending package for them in your package on page 21 and 23 of the agenda package. The second category there, these items were in the previous financial plan. We don't have a spending package for them. But the budget amount changed. So here we've got a contingency amount for small equipment that was in at 20,000. The other years it's in at 30,000. So proposal is to increase 2021 to 30,000, the same as the other years. The geo bags, this 350,000 is just the amount that was in 2020. The project didn't get completed other than some design aspects. So proposal is to move that budget that was unspent into 2021 and also a proposal that the 350 is not enough for the project, so proposals to add another 100,000 to that project. River intake modifications, that was in the last year's last budget as well, but the design for this is increased from 50 to 70,000, and the construction in 2022 is estimated to go from 200 to 250. And then the intake pump shaft alignment project that was previously in the budget is no longer required at this point, so that's a reduction to the budget. So now we're into some new items here. So the first part is these are spending packages that Mr. Doxey referenced to. So these are on page from page 19 to page 27 of the agenda package. So if anybody has any questions on any of those, perhaps we can just come back to these when I finish going through the items, and then we can come back to questions on these if there are any. And then these are a bunch of other miscellaneous changes that don't have a spending package prepared for them. So the items, I think in the agenda package, there's description of what each of these items are. It doesn't fit on the PowerPoint, so the descriptions aren't here. So they're ranging from wage allocations or putting in some wages to all the way down to our discussion on transfer to reserves. And the last item is a construction, I believe that item does have a spending package, construction project closeout with the engineer. So a lot of these items, I put these items in the presentation, and if there's any questions, I'm going to be referring them to our director of operations or our acting director of engineering. I think that's all the changes, and then this is just a listing that Mr. Doxey already had in his of the spending packages. So not sure if there's any questions or changes on any of these items that anybody would like to go to. And the next discussion is basically on the reserve. So what we're looking at is trying to set up a reserve for future expenditures. So when something comes up in the future, we'll have a reserve to cover it, as opposed to having to go back to each of the joint ventures to ask for more money. Right now, the initial proposal is for $100,000 a year when we complete the asset management for this project. We'll come up with a better number for that. Right now, it's not based on any necessarily reality. It's just to get something in the reserve so that when some of these expenditures come up that are unexpected, we'll have something back to cover it, as opposed to going back to the ratepayers. And the other proposal is to, in 2020, we did have some contingencies in there in operations that were not necessary to be used. And at this point, we do have a surplus in 2020. So the proposal would be to put that directly into the reserve and then start contributing in 2021 to that reserve fund. And then that's the summarized plan. So. And that's the end of that.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. Do we have questions for Mr. Butterworth at this time? Once the screen, Director Rogers, you're the only one I can't see. If you have something, just shout out, hey, and I'll pick you up from there.
Yeah, no, I've got some questions. Thanks, Doug.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Director Rogers, proceed, please.
Yeah, Mr. Butterworth, when we take a look at the budget there, the 43,500 for the environmental monitoring, I see that's added in as a new item. But when Mr. Doxey was doing his report, he was saying it was actually a requirement from DFO when we got the permit. So I'm wondering if when we got the permit, it was a requirement, why we hadn't included this at that time and putting it forward to once we got operational.
The staff member who would have been responsible for that isn't with the city anymore, so I can't answer that question. I'm not sure anybody else can or not.
Okay, so we're saying that's because of a change in staffing at Parksville that we don't have the answer for that. Just looking at the other one you have on there is geobag maintenance in 2021. but we haven't done the geo bags yet. We're actually changing the budget, adding another $100,000, and we've just approved the awarding of the contract for the $377,000 for 2021. So if they're brand new and if they're being installed in 2021, why do we need $24,000 of geobag maintenance in there?
Mr. Doxey, maybe Mr. Doxey could answer that one.
If I may, through the chair, sure. The reason it was split out was the bags were considered to be kind of a maintenance item because they're a remove and replace, like a wearable item, as opposed to the infrastructure itself for the geobag system. It was something that kind of came up at the nth hour where it was just determined that that would be considered an operational item as opposed to capital. So.
I think he wanted to buy an initial supply of them as well to have some bags on hand.
Yeah, initially the plan was to buy that, sorry about that, the aforementioned four smaller bags. Operational flexibility.
As a follow-up with respect to that, so is the contract that we've just done of $377,719, does that include this extra set of geo bags, or is that $24,000 on top? Are we issuing a contract then to Bishop Water Technologies for $401,000 or $402,000 to include a backup set that's going to be charged to maintenance?
If I may, through the chair, yes, that's the plan. Is it would probably be on a separate contract for the supply of the waste bags than the capital, but yes.
It may, again, I guess as a follow-up, is there any other supplier of these geo bags, or are we going ahead with this supply contract, and knowing that we'll also be coming to the same outfit for another $24,000 in the same year?
If I may, through the chair, yes, there are other companies that provide and supply the waste bags. The tender was open to the public, and this was a company that was kind of leading the technology. But there are other vendors out there. When we do subsequent replacements and renewals, we would certainly look to for competitive pricing as they come up from year to year.
And it's necessary to do that in 2021 as well as this original initial contract.
If I may, through the chair, yes. Likely in the first year, we would use the system bags come from the vendor, the proprietor that actually is designing the infrastructure and installing the infrastructure for the tender, just to make sure we get through that warranty and maintenance period. Once we're through that period, I think we would look at options and make sure that we're getting competitive bag replacements and renewals.
Okay, thank you. I guess this one to Mr. Butterworth. When we look at the, you've referenced the 2020, how many dollars do you think could be in that surplus and available as seed money for this reserve going forward?
If I may, Mr. Chair, through to the board member. At this point, in operations, there is roughly $200,000 surplus, but that will change. There's still some costs that have not come in yet for December. Most of the costs for December will not be in until January. So that number will come down, but right now it's sitting at just above 200,000 on the operating side. And there's a little bit of surplus on the capital side as well, although not very much.
So if I might, as a follow-up, Chair, is that saying then that by the end of 2021, we'll have a reserve fund for this of approximately $300,000, probably as a minimum, when we look at the 200 plus the capital one?
I don't think it'll be that high because I don't think 2020 is going to end with the 200,000. It's just that's where it's at right now. So we do have some large bills still to come through for December. But yes, it'll probably be between 250 to 275,000 would be my guess at this time. Educated guess, I guess, but without the final numbers, I can't really give you a final number.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mayor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious here, if we've got, let's say $150,000 of that $200,000 in surplus left at the end of the year, would we not be smarter to apply that against the all these copious the tax requisition for the two partners on this? It just seems to me like if you've got it, and you're starting to put reserve money in 2021, the very first year. You know, it's nice to have the reserve, but it's also nice to pay off your operational expenses without having to go back to the taxpayer for some of that. And so if we can cut into the tax requisition by applying that surplus against some of these expenses that we're looking at, it might prove to be a little bit better use of the money.
I believe that was to Mr. Butterworth.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the proposal to set up a reserve is with a operation this size and a facility this size. I don't think when we get our asset management done that 100,000 is going to be close enough to what we really should be putting aside. So we could certainly, if we want to wait till we get that report, one proposal could be to take the 2021 amount out and still care, and then that funds wouldn't be collected from the ratepayers, and then use the 2020 one at least to establish the reserve. So 150,000 or whatever the number is would be in there, and then we wouldn't add to it in 2021. I think it does get us further behind on what we should be putting in the reserve, but that's certainly, we don't really know the amount yet. So we could wait until next year till we have the amount and then establish the reserve or update the reserve amount at that point in time.
Follow up, Mayor Main.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying, and it's nice to have a reserve, but I mean, the thing hasn't even been open a full 12 months and we're starting to gather money up for the next big expenditures. I'm looking at this and our taxpayers are getting hit from all different sides for all different kinds of expenses. We're talking about huge increases to the hospital fund. We're talking about tax increases from each of the municipalities. We're going to be hit with the RDN tax increase. All of these things against a time when life is not all that rosy for the taxpayers. I'd like to see, quite frankly, if it was up to me, I'd take the $150,000 and I would take the $100,000 that's put in here and start on the reserve in 2022 rather than 2021. And then we've got $250,000, which will go against the requirements or the tax requisition for these additional expenses.
Yeah, Chair recognizes Mr. Butterworth. Response, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify there, this doesn't affect the tax requisition, at least for the city. I'm not sure what it affects for the region. This affects our ratepayers in the water fund, and the surpluses in the water fund at this point in time, or the accumulated surpluses, are sufficient to absorb these cost increases.
Follow up, Mayor Main.
Thank you. I understand that, but on the other side of it, there's only one person paying the taxes here, whether it's something that's coming up in the future, whether we've got it there for a surplus in our water fund. We're developing that water fund for other things, if I'm not mistaken, in the future. So, I don't buy into that at this point in time. All I'm suggesting is let's take the transfer to reserves that you've allocated here, $100,000. Let's take the surplus of 150 or whatever that number ends up to be, and let's apply it against the cost that you're for all these increases that we're looking at, so that we can reduce what we ask the taxpayer for, whether it's from the water fund or whether it's from property taxes or whether it's from parcel taxes. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's still coming from the same group of people.
I think if I could follow up with a comment at this point too, along those same lines, I believe what Mayor Main is trying to put forth is the fact that the taxpayers and or ratepayers for the water system have already incurred numerous increased costs anyways, just to get the WTP ERWS operational at this time. And we've been hit pretty hard with it, as we know. So I too would be in favor of taking a year off anyways, put into accumulated surplus and so forth instead of, and then take a holiday until 2022, where we do start to build out the surplus. I like the idea of the surplus, Mr. Butterworth, but I believe that at this particular time, it's prudent to actually recognize that the taxpayers, ratepayers have been hit hard with the already rather large expenses for the last 2 years. The chair recognizes Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I hear what Mayor Main is saying and what you're saying. My question's relative to the reserve. We're trying to identify just once the slide showed there, the transfer of the 2020 surplus into that plus the $100,000. I guess I think that it should probably still stay in there. When I look at the scale of this water treatment plant and the water intake, I look at some of the experiences that we've had in 2020 with it in its first year of operation. And, you know, come what may, relative to where we find things with warranties and so on and that, I think what this year has demonstrated is that this is going to be perhaps a more costly system to maintain and operate than what we had originally thought. So I think it is prudent to put in both the surplus, which I was trying to get a handle on, plus the $100,000, and so that we do have a good reserve going forward. And at the same time, still identifying 2021, as Mr. Butterworth says, through the asset management for this project, just what that reserve should be going forward. So I do support the budget with the transfer of the 2020 surplus and the $100,000 of new reserve in 2021. So.
Director Wallace, you're off my screen again, so yell if you have your hand up. I hear nothing. Can we go off the sharing of the screen if we could, Mr. Butterworth?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they wanted to talk about any items, so that's why I left it on there.
Yeah, thank you. Unless is there any further questions that we require that from any members of the board at this time?
I guess with that still on there, and it still keeps in mind, one reason that challenge I do find within this one is this fact of in 2021, putting that $24,000 for geobag maintenance when we haven't even built the thing, and we've just today awarded a contract for the design and supply and so on and that. So I'm certainly more comfortable if that $24,000 was moved into 2022 and then spaced out after that.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. I see no hands up. So what I'd like to do is that we're on section 8.2, folks, for the water service financial plan report. There are recommendations to follow. I would like to break them out separately. We have 4 separate ones. So if we could break them out separately, that will allow anyone to speak to that individually, if I may. So do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation number 1, that the report from the Englishman River Water Service Management Committee dated December 10th, 2020, entitled Englishman River Water Service 2021 to 2025 financial plan be received? Moved by Director Wallace, seconded by Mayor Main. Thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. The next recommendation up is number 2, that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board approve the ERWS 2021-2025 financial plan attached as per Schedule A. I need a mover and a seconder.
Mm-mm.
I second for discussion. Is there discussion regarding this one at this time? Director Rogers, you have first pointed discussion as mover. None?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, I'll approve and be voting in favor of the financial plan as presented, including both the reserve fund and the aquifer storage and recovery report.
Thank you. I would like to propose an amended motion to this financial plan. That amended motion at this time would be to take the aquifer storage and recovery amount of $50,000 from the financial plan and to change the description on that to read for water storage options, including consultants' reports, to the tune of $50,000. Do I have a seconder on that? Seconded by Director Wallace. Discussion. Since I'm proposing it, I feel that we've already explained our positions anyways on this aquifer storage and recovery. So that's all I have to say about that. You know that I'm against it, and obviously I wouldn't have put this motion through otherwise. Any further discussion? I recognize, the chair recognizes Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding this to staff, if I might, just in terms of if we are to change the description of this, does this fit with the current terms of ERWS insofar as its mandate to seek water storage as part of its service delivery? Is that accurate, that this is actually part of the mandate?
I believe that would probably be best directed to CAO Kaler. If CAO Kaler. Hello, thank you.
If I may, I think that what would be very helpful for staff who are going to have to write up an RFP and figure out what's going on in terms of the scope of the project would be to get perhaps a bit more of an understanding from the board. Is this something you do not want the summary of the ASR reports? You're looking for more broad water storage options. The discussion focused more on sort of upper mountain area, like dam options, I think was perhaps what was being referred to. Or is this something that you're hoping that could be a combination of a summary of the ASR in terms of its feasibility, risks, pros and cons, plus other options that might also work for the system in our area? Is that correct? I just think staff might need a little bit more direction.
If I may reply, it would be actually not recognizing any further action regarding the ASR project, and would be actually using that money as budgeted to be included as for possible storage options for whether it's highland water storage or in reservoir storage. So it would be, but it would be just in the budget for if and when, it would be for 2021, if and when we were able to send that out to consultants report, and which would probably be decided by the board anyways at another future meeting, but at least we have it in the budget already allocated for. It would be my intention.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question from Director Wallace, please. You're muted, Director Wallace.
Oh, I almost made it through the week without doing that. Oh, well. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. If I could have a quick follow-up then, just to be sure, if we're just taking something that's been presented from staff in the financial plan and rewording it, that it would still fit properly, be categorized properly. I think what we're talking about is a fund for feasibility study for storage. Is that, I guess, how would staff like to receive that direction for the 2021 budget, not having a current work plan in place for the alternative motion that's been moved?
my thoughts is that the staff wouldn't have a work plan yet because they haven't even began to put it up for a consultant stage, which would have to be a consultant issue at this time. All that it is just allocating funds for a possible consultant study as worded by the staff in their wisdom. And maybe clarification from CAO Kaler.
Thank you, Chair O'Brien. I just have a question that maybe one of the RDN experts on the ASR project, is this something, could weigh in, but is this something that could perhaps then be moved to 2022? Just mentioning some of the items that the board were discussing. If this isn't something urgent, with, where we were trying to summarize the ASR and kind of close a loop, is it something that the RDN staff have concerns about perhaps moving out to a later stage so that we can get everything sorted out with the plant right now this year, and perhaps look at the due diligence on additional storage in 2022? If the chair is okay with perhaps directing that to the RDN staff?
If any of the RDN staff are listening and can answer that, my thoughts are at this particular point is that I was just trying to have it just removed from the Act for Storage and Recovery description and changed into something different. If nothing else, maybe at this time we should just vote on deleting it or canceling it from the financial plan. Would that be more suitable? Would that make it easier for staff? Because as you say, it's an issue that's going to be pushed until we're fully operational on the WTP. I see Mr. Alexander has come on, and I recognize him. If you could help lead us with this. Thank you, Mr. Alexander.
Certainly, I think that given that we don't have a scope of work for what the board is proposing at this point, it's a different type of study or evaluation than what we've been anticipating for ASR. I think it's certainly reasonable that it could be done later, simply because there's quite a bit of work to figure out what the scope is that the board would want to see in such a study as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alexander, and Chair recognizes Mayor Main.
Thanks, Chair. Might I suggest that perhaps we could just do a brief workshop on this sometime in the new year, where we can just sit around the table and talk about what all the alternatives, and at the end of the workshop, make a decision or make a recommendation to staff as to what way to go with this for 2022. We won't have the time in 2021 anyways to be doing any type of research on this as it stands. So I'd like to push it off, as the CAO has suggested, push it off to 2022. But I would also like to have a bit of a workshop where we could all sit down and have a conversation. Director Rogers could be talking about, the SAR. You could be talking about the high level water beds. I could be talking about a pipe coming from Lake Cameron. I don't know, something, all of these things, maybe have some conversation and then kind of whittle it down, if you will, at the end of a 3 or 4 hour chinwag. It might seem like a proper way to do this rather than trying to do this in a 15-minute time frame right now. So we defer it to 2022 as
Thank you, Mayor Main. And if I could recognize Mr. Alexander.
Well, I would just say that even putting together a workshop will take a significant amount of work, because there'll need to be a fair amount of technical information available so that you can evaluate and chew on the different options that might be available and the feasibility of them. So I'm not comfortable at this point. Staff would be able to provide you the technical support needed for a workshop without doing some significant advanced work.
we've waited this long.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. The chair recognizes Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And with respect to, certainly I'm not going to support at this time the current amendment with respect to this motion. Because I think we're doing ourselves and the public a disservice if we leave stuff with respect to aquifer storage and recovery alone. And I think one of the concerns I have is that fellow members on the board are thinking that I'm thinking that aquifer storage and recovery is the only way to go. What I'm saying is it's one of the options that has been presented to us in the past, and one of the options that we have expended a certain amount, quite a lot of energy and resources on over the last several years. And we need to have something that brings that to a better sense of the information to allow us to make a decision. It is one option for storage. And I think, and my concern is that we're just leaving that and saying, okay, no, we're never going to talk about that again. And so, and I don't think we have the information that's of value to us not to consider it further as one option. So if we are looking at alternative methods of storage, and that's something I think we need to do, but with the something there on ASR to be included in that. But if we're going to look at alternate storage, then it is a significant project. Like Mr. Alexander says, that it's going to take a lot of resources, and it's going to looking forward into it for a long time. So whether it's highland water or whether it's man-made reservoirs sitting on a piece of property somewhere and so on, looking at the cost of those are options that I think we have to have in front of us. So I'm concerned people are getting the idea that the only thing that I support and so on is aquifer storage and recovery. That is far, far from the truth. I think we have to take a look at it as one option. So, but right now, I don't think 2021 is the time to do a study. I don't think you'll do a study looking at all the options for storage for just $50,000. And if we're going to look at that, I think we have to go beyond this 2021 to 2025 budget. And we have to take a look at the long-term capacity of the treatment plant and what it means for other modules, whether we have the water from the Englishman River, sufficient water to build that facility up, like was in the plan of why it was built, designed and built with modules and so on to increase it. So it's a challenge that I think we have to somehow deal with, and perhaps as Mayor Main is saying that we have to sit down someday in some sort of workshop, but recognizing the authority that we have within workshops, it's not something where we can give direction to staff without having that as some opportunity for some public debate and so on it. So it's a little concerning about where we're sitting right now on this, but just a motion to switch it from ASR to storage and setting $50,000 in there is something that I can't support.
Thank you, Director Rogers. I think at this time, what I'm hearing here is that we're all kind of on the same basis here. We're all concerned about storage of the water, and we recognize that. We also recognize something else is the fact that 2021 is probably not the year to be even concerned about it. So if we have an understanding here that under that line item ASR also is going to include other options when we get around to that, anyways, other storage options, as Director Rogers has indicated, I think that's good enough for me. And the thing is that all of this time is I'd maybe like to, at this time, just defer that budget amount of $50,000 into year 2022. Would that be in agreement with others?
If I may, Chair Brian. So the motion on the floor right now that was moved by yourself and seconded by Director Wallace was to remove the $50,000 being set for ASR and change it to a water storage option report. So if I would maybe suggest that if both yourself and Director Wallace are okay with an amendment to that motion, that it basically just be amended to remove the 50,000 for now, or if you prefer amending it to deferring the 50,000, because I think the motion right now doesn't really reflect what I think I'm hearing the board say you want the direction to be. Or we could take no vote on that motion and do.
I think I would like to withdraw that motion, if I may, and if my seconder I believe was Director Wallace. If we could withdraw that and rephrase that into a new motion, just to have the $50,000 from the aquifer storage and recovery column and move that from year 2021 and move it to 2022.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And do I have a seconder for that, please?
Oh, sure.
Seconded by Director Wallace. Thank you. Discussion. Director Wallace, or Director Rogers, sorry.
Yeah, I won't be supporting that because I think it is, I hate to, appears to be beating a dead horse with respect to my fellow board members. I won't be supporting it because I think it is important for us to have a report that summarizes what we've learned over the last 10 years with respect to aquifer storage, what is out there, what potential there is, what risks are, and so on and that. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't proceed with that. Putting it off for another year is just going to make it worse, and so on. And that is something that we put off last year and we put off the year before, and so on. And I don't think you can keep putting off summarizing the report and letting the public know and ourselves know what we've learned about aquifer storage and recovery, what is out there and so on, and what the risks and the potential are and what the potential costs are as an alternative for storage. And I think if we just keep putting it off year after year, we're just doing ourselves and the public a disservice.
Thank you. And the chair recognizes Mayor Main.
Thank you, Chair. I agree that this has been kicked down the road for a long time now, 10 or 12 years that we've been doing this. The problem I've got with not deferring it is the fact that our engineering staff, our operations staff, all of those people are tied up with just fixing the problems at the current facility. Let's not try to bring them in and fix all of and start now working on another project, a separate project to provide answers for us on there. The only way you can vote on the other part of it is by having some more answers. And the only way you get more answers is through the engineering staff. And if we go through the engineering staff, we're taking them away from the job that they're doing for us that's far more important, which is getting clean water to the residents. So I think that we just defer it for one more year. Yeah, I know, I don't like to kick it down the road any more than anybody else. But in this case, I think it makes sense to go down. Hopefully by this time next year, we've got many of the items solved at the facility, and we can spare some time to look at this more intelligently.
Thank you, Mayor Main. The chair recognizes Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. Just if I could just ask that staff read the current motion, because I think it doesn't quite reflect that we want to change to defer to 2022, the $50,000 amount, but also remove the ASR from the study of water storage. So I think what we have discussed and what we're trying to achieve is, due to operational and engineering constraints for 2021, we want to defer the topic of water storage to 2022, and that the topic of water storage is no longer limited to ASR. So to achieve that, we would want to relabel it for that year. Is that correct?
That is the intent. That was the intent of my motion, yes. A little more descriptive and perhaps inclusive. And that too would include the storage option of reviewing the ASR, but as well as other ones as well. So as long as that is approval with, there you are. Okay, CAO Kaler, does that make sense to you?
It does. I think that's pretty clear. And Rebecca is taking the minutes officially, but I'll connect with her afterwards, and I'm taking notes here as well. So I think we got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your help on that. And I see Mr. Butterworth, I recognize you if you have comments, sir.
There we go. Trying to find the unmute button. I was hitting the wrong thing. Yeah, just the only comment would be is if we're changing that description, it's right now it's sitting in ASR in capital, assuming it was relating to the ASR project. If it's going to be changed in scope, we're going to move it. We'd have to move it to minor capital. It doesn't affect funding or anything else. It just wouldn't be a capital item anymore.
I would expect that anyways. The fact that it was in capital anyways was a question. If all that we were looking originally was for a summary, I'm wondering why it was there anyhow. So yes, I agree 100%, Mr. Butterworth. Further questions on the motion on the floor or comments? Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and tax everybody's patience. But with respect to, there's been reference and so on to engineering staff and so on. Been my understanding that this would be a joint report and a joint study involving both Parksville and the regional district staff, including Mr. Alexander's and Mr. Walter's staff, but also that it would more primarily involve the efforts of a consultant. And so I guess I'm having a challenge with these concerns over the impact of what it might have on Mr. Doxey's or somebody else's time. And so just a bit of a clarification on that, because I certainly didn't see it as something that was going to take away from Mr. Doxey's or Ms. Wood's time with respect to this. Perhaps could have a comment from Ms. Kaler on that, or Mr. Alexander.
If I may, I'll just quickly mention that I think there would be a significant amount of the work done by a consultant, but managing the project, doing the RFP, making sure that the reports are presented to council and that they're vetted through our systems would take some staff time, certainly. But I believe that the RDN staff had offered to take the lead on this particular one. We do try our best to work together as much as we can. So I'll let Randy weigh in with the chair's permission on the RDN's implications, but just from our perspective, there would be some, but the bulk of the work was actually budgeted for a consultant, and then staff would support that process.
Thank you, CAO Kaler. If Mr. Alexander is still on the Zoom. Thank you. Hello, Randy. If you can comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I lost my connection for a moment, but fortunately I got it back. So this, we could certainly, I think we'd intended to assist and take the lead on the ASR work in 2021 to coordinate a consultant's efforts. This is what we're talking about now is a very different type of study that we'd really need to have involvement of staff, I think at a higher level, both in Parksville and at the RDN, and trying to find a consultant. And so it's a bigger piece of work, certainly, and not as well defined.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Alexander. Is there any further comments? Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. You know what, I just want to say that I think we have a good direction on this one, move forward, and I'll certainly be voting in support of it. But I also feel I need to remind my fellow members here that there are people that are 10 minutes down the road who don't have good, clean drinking water. You know, it's brown and crappy coming out of their faucet. It's been like that for a long time, and there's lots of opportunities to create lots of great improvements in the water in the Oceanside area. And so again, I'll be in support of this amended motion, and I hope that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wallace. The chair recognizes Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just following up on Director Wallace's comments, I think we need to recognize that this is the Englishman River Water Services was a joint venture of Parksville and the RDN as represented by Area E. The only two funders of the ERWS are Parksville and the residents of electoral Area E, the News Bay. When we're looking at storage here and so on, we're not looking for storage for any other area that may be having challenges with water. That is not within the mandate of the ERWS and so on, and it's not within the scope of this financial plan. So it's not something we're not trying to look in here, nor do we have the authority to be looking at or funding taxpayers' money that's coming from Parksville or from residents of Area E to be funding storage reports and so on, and investigations with respect to other areas within the RDN and within the city of Parksville.
Thank you, Director Rogers. Any further questions or comments? The chair recognizes Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. I understand how this is structured, and I understand how these plans work, but we are all part of the Mount Arrowsmith biosphere. and our water is all interrelated. And the more partnerships we can form for the greater area will be better for our residents. Thank you.
Yeah,
Dr. Wallace.
yeah. Brian, if I might just,
The chair
This is-
recognizes Director Rogers.
yeah, this English River Water Services is not the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere and so on. The Mount Arrow Biosphere is not a body that has any authority with respect to looking at studies or looking at providing infrastructure or providing water sources for any particular part within that biosphere area. So it's not something that should be entered into this discussion.
Thank you, Director Rogers. I believe we're all kind of going around in circles, maybe going outside the realm of the motion. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands.
Sorry, just clarify, it's motion as amended. Right? That's what we're voting on?
You are correct.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion as amended and clarified by Director Wallace and as well as by CAO Kaler. All those in favor? Opposed? Let the vote reflect that Director Wallace, Mayor Ed Main, Chair O'Brien all voted in favor of the motion. Director Rogers voted opposed. Thank you. I would ask now anyways that the Englishman River Management Water Service Management Board approve the other remaining items on the ERWS financial plan attached as per Schedule A. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? For the financial plan, we already pulled out the one item on the aquifer source and recovery. Do I have a mover and seconder for the rest of the plan? Hearing none, I see no vote. That is defeated. I'll move on to recommendation number 3. That the Englishman River Water Service Management Board recommends the joint ventures adopt their respective portions of the Englishman River Water Service 2021-2025 amended financial plan. Attached to Schedule B, Parksville, and Schedule B, RDN or Regional District of Nanaimo. We have a mover and a seconder for that section.
Chair, just a question, if I may, before we move it.
Absolutely recognize Mayor Main.
If you didn't have the previous motion passed, is this not a redundant motion then? I'm just asking. For our purposes of it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying because I felt that this was under the joint ventures, but it's also part and parcel to the first part never being passed as well. I understand.
If I may, Chair O'Brien,
Thank you.
could we ask our CFO? I don't think we can, if we don't get the budget approved in some format, I think we have some legislative challenges. I think we need some form of budget approved at today's meeting. The only other item that the board raised as a concern was the issue relating to the surplus. So I think if we could get some direction on some elements of the budget, I think we do legally require that. If our CFO could confirm for me or for the board.
Yes,
Thank
if
you.
I may,
Mr. Butterworth.
Chair O'Brien, we do need to get a budget passed pretty quick. The RDN deadline is much tighter than ours. The city has a little more time with our deadline, but their deadline to pass their overall budget is March 31st. So their timelines are much tighter than ours. So we would really appreciate it if there's certain items that the board does not like in the budget, perhaps they could be removed and then we could approve the rest of the budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. If the chair recognizes Mayor Main.
Thank you, Chair. I would make the motion that the surplus funds from 2020 be applied against the costs spending packages. And I would also add in there that the $100,000 reserve fund be pushed off until 2021, to begin at 2021 instead of 2020, or 2022 rather, I'm sorry, instead of 2021. Those would be then I would be happy with the financial plan. I
Thank
still
you.
have questions, but.
So this is moved by Mayor Main. Do I have a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Director Wallace. Comments, questions, discussion? Anyone further than the motion as presented by Mayor Main? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried by Director Wallace, Mayor Main, Chair O'Brien, all voting in favor. And Director Rogers, was that opposed? I didn't see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair Brown, I didn't hear you call for opposed.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. And opposed for that motion is Director Rogers. Thank you for that clarification. I couldn't, you went off screen for a minute there and I didn't see you. Thank you. So that motion carries a vote regarding the surplus. So going back to the question on number 2, that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board approve the ERWS 2021-2025 financial plan attached as per Schedule A and per amended motions. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. I need a mover and a seconder.
I'm moving it.
Moved by Mayor Main, seconded by Director Wallace. Discussion and question. Debate. Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair O'Brien. I'll be brief. I just have a question about the asset management plan. Is that something that will be coming together in 2021 so that by this time next year, a true estimate of what the reserve building should look like would be available?
I believe we'll direct that to Mr. Butterworth, if we could, please.
Yes, that is currently being worked on as we speak. So I suspect we should have that in the early part of 2021 ready. So for the next board meeting, assuming that's in the second half of 2021, we should have that.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. Does that answer your question, Director Wallace?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Any follow-up required? Other comments? Director Rogers, please.
Yeah, I'll be voting against this motion because I think it is important to build up the reserve and have that established, because I say based on what we've seen from this year's operations in a brand new facility, our reserve, I think at $100,000 not starting until 2022, I think we need to be building up a reserve sooner.
Thank you, Director Rogers. Any further questions or comments? Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair O'Brien. So the nature of my first question, that the asset management projections of what kind of reserves will be required in 2021, could the soonest that we could be amending the 5-year plan for that would be this time next year. Is that correct?
Through to Mr. Butterworth.
Yes, if I may, the budget could be amended sooner. It could be amended in May, whatever we want, but in all likelihood, if we don't do a budget amendment, if we don't come up with, if there's not new costs or changes that need to be made to the budget, then we wouldn't have a requirement for a budget amendment. So then this would just form part of the 2022 to 2026 financial plan, and that's when we would bring it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. Any follow-up, any further comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Nope,
Opposed? And all those opposed? Thank you. All in favor was Director Wallace, Mayor Main, Chair O'Brien. Opposed, Director Rogers. Thank you. That is carried. Now the next portion is, as we discussed before, I read before, if you all have number 3, that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board recommends the joint ventures adopt their respective portions of the Englishman River Water Service 2021-2025 amended financial plan. Attached to Schedule B, Parksville, and Schedule B, Regional District of Nanaimo. I need a mover or a seconder. Moved by Mayor Main. Seconded. I'll second that. Discussion. So this is for the management board. Is there any further discussion or questions about the joint ventures adopt the same plan? Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. I actually would like to perhaps hear from Director Rogers on, I noticed that you didn't move the motion. I recognize that it's an Area E service. I would be wanting to just hear from you on the motion, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wallace. Chair recognizes Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In response to Director Wallace, no, because I won't be supporting this or recommending this to the board for adoption.
Thank you. And if I may at this time put a question to Mr. Butterworth. If this does not get adopted at this time, does this pose difficulties to you at this point? For the Joint Ventures Service Management Board?
I think it would be, we have the other budget approved, so what feeds out of that is the partner's share and contribution. So I would hope that this would get passed because all it's basically is just the partner's share of the costs. Otherwise, there'd be no funding. So if the partners, if this didn't go back to the partners, like the RDN for their area and the city of Parksville, to fund the ERWS, there would be no funding. So I think it's pretty critical. I did want to make, I was raising my hand because on the recommendation, the way it's written also, first of all, it says amended financial plan. It should just say financial plan. So that amended shouldn't have been in there. And the second thing is it should be the financial plan as amended by the resolutions that the two resolutions or recommendations you guys passed on moving the ASR. So we need to amend these schedules based on that. So I just wanted to make sure that was part of the recommendation, not to just accept them the way they are, because we have to move some of that, take the 100,000 out from the 20 for the reserve and move the 50,000 from 2021 to 2022.
So if I may, I believe it was Mayor Main proposed the motion and I seconded. Would Mayor Main be acceptable to amending that to include amended as per the recommendations as per the previous motion?
Chair, that's exactly what I thought we were doing. So I'm fine with that.
Thank you. And I seconded it, so I'm fine with that as well. Further comments? Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I fully recognize the importance of this motion and appreciate Mr. Butterworth's comments on it and so on, because it is critical that in this joint venture that it be funded by the partners. Unfortunately, I'm not able to support the budget that has been in the financial plan that's been put forward, and I won't be recommending it to the RDN board or supporting it, and I won't be putting forward that as something that to be funded by Area E in this fashion. So.
If I may comment at this time, though, the fact that the board here has already approved the financial management plan anyways for 2021, 2025, regardless of if you agree with it, it has passed. So I don't understand, are you suggesting that you're not going to fund your portion from your area?
No, what I'm saying is that I won't be supporting this at the RDN board, that it not be supported. I think this is very poor-sighted with respect to this, with respect to and the singular aspects and motions from fellow directors and on this board, not to recognize the importance of doing the ASR report and so on. That in my mind is unacceptable. And recognizing that you have a choice to do that, it does not recognize the fact that 26% of this joint venture is funded by the residents of Area E in the News Bay within the RDN, and that there's not recognition of that within this budget. And also there's not recognition of the fact that we do need to, on a project that is this significant and has had such experience in 2021 in its first year of operation, doesn't recognize the need as recommended by Parksville staff or by the management committee of ERWS to move forward with the reserve and the building of the reserve, including the transfer of the 2020 surplus, I think isn't right, and I just can't support that. So.
Thank you. Any further comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is passed and all those opposed? Thank you, Director Rogers. That is passed by Director Wallace, Mayor Main, Chair O'Brien. Opposed? Director Rogers. That is carried. Fourth item, if I may, that any budget surpluses from 2020 be transferred to a reserve for future expenditures other than the $350,000 for the GeoBag budget, which is being carried forward to the 2021 budget. I need a mover and a seconder, please.
Excuse me, point of order, Chair O'Brien. I think that was already addressed with respect to Mayor Main's previous motion with respect to the budget.
If I may, Chair O'Brien.
Thank you, CAO Kaler.
What we would normally do in the city of Parksville at this point is just call it, and there would be recorded as no vote, if that's what the board would like to do.
I would suggest so. Therefore, at this point, I will call the question as no vote. Thank you. Moving on. Reports. We still have more to go. Would City of Parksville staff, if you're still there, please introduce the next report on the agenda regarding Englishman River water service, communication, and reporting going forward. Welcome, Belinda.
Thank you, Chair O'Brien. I'm going to keep this really short. I just wanted to take a few seconds to introduce myself. My name is Belinda Woods, and I'm the new Director of Operations here in Parksville. And I'm sure I'll be getting to know all of you very shortly. I've been here a few weeks, and I've been lucky enough to meet some of the folks from the RDN. And thank you to all of them for reaching out and offering their assistance and support in this. And one of the things that we've all discussed recently is how we want to move forward with our communication and reporting plans. So that's going to be something that we're going to be working on so that we can come up with a holistic approach and a holistic way to report and to communicate to you in the best manner that we can. Thank you, Chair O'Brien.
Thank you, Belinda. Is there any questions or comments or any other comments for Belinda while she's here? I recognize Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and pleased to meet you virtually, Belinda. I think it is important that that the Englishman Water Services does look at some communications and reporting adaptations and changes going forward. I think that it needs to have some work done on it, and so I certainly look forward to seeing some recommendations from the staff, Parksville and RDN, with respect to how communications and reporting can be improved. And it certainly, I think, needs to be done on a more regular basis than just our meeting a couple of times a year as a board. There needs to be some more operational updates and so on, and certainly some more opportunity for directors and staff to be kept current with ongoing situations and so on within the system. So thanks very much. Look forward to seeing some changes in that.
Thank you, Director Rogers. And any other further comments? So thank you, Belinda. You're doing, in your short time here, you're just doing an amazing job, let me tell you. You're doing fine. Thank you. I'm going to move on, if I may, to more reports. We have, would the City of Parksville staff please introduce the next report on the agenda regarding the 8.4, the Englishman River Water Service Joint Venture Agreement Renewal.
With permission, Chair, I can take that one.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Please do so.
This is just a sort of a quasi repeat of the information I passed on in the AWS section of the meeting, but we do have to get a new agreement together for the joint venture, which was passed on to staff on Wednesday for a preliminary look. The big thing that's going on in the ERWS agreement is the previous agreement was largely, well, not largely, but it had a large component that was concerned with the spending of capital and construction and things like that. And moving forward, now that we're operating the plant, we need to change the focus of the agreement more from construction and capital management to operations and maintenance of the facility. So that's sort of a change that will be affected in that agreement. But other than that, it's going to look very similar to the old one. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Walters, for your report. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board direct staff to prepare a new agreement to replace the existing Englishman River Water Service joint venture agreement that expires December 31, 2020, and forward it to the joint venture partners for consideration? Mover and seconder, please. Moved by Director Wallace, seconded by Director Rogers. Comments? Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried unanimous. Thank you, one and all. Moving along, business arising from delegations. I see no delegations. We will move on to new business. New business. Does any member of the board have any new business at this time? Seeing none. Get to everybody's favorite point. I'll call for an adjournment at this time. I would like to recognize Mayor Main as calling, moving it, and Director Wallace as seconding it. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, all the best of the season. Thank you very much. That was most enjoyable. And thank you for all the staff in the background, trying to keep up with us and burning a little midnight oil while at the same time.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yes, best of the
Thank
season
you.
to all. Thank you all.